Number 5. This happened in the early 2000s when I was around 9 or 10 years old. A large majority of my family decided to visit my elderly aunt in Waco, Texas. She lived in a bad part of town, but due to how my family was, it didn't bother us at all. It was about 11 p.m. and everyone was in the living room singing along to the musical on television, lounging around on blanket pallets and pajamas and enjoying everybody's company. Now, when I say the living room was full, that's an understatement. We were practically on top of each other, but it didn't spoil our fun. What did spoil our fun was the front door opening slowly. Everybody immediately went silent because 1, we weren't expecting anyone, and 2, the only other person with a key to my aunt's house was her son, who lives in a totally different state and was gone on business. What I now know was the barrel of a rifle began coming through the door with the person peering around. As soon as I saw the person's eyes, they immediately yanked the gun back and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I have the wrong house. I'm looking for a friend." They then closed the door and took off. Nobody moved, blinked, or exhaled for at least 1 minute. At the time, I didn't understand how close my family came to its end. As soon as everyone came to their senses, my aunt made record time locking and bolting her door. Needless to say, no one slept very easily that night. My aunt never moved out of that house or neighborhood, despite her son begging and even offering for her to move in with him. She said, "I'm not gonna let some wannabe gangster scare me out of my house. I just wish I had the same nerve that she had." Number 4. I was working as the only cook shortly after high school. Looking back at everything about that job, it was incredibly sketchy, including the owner. Being that it was a sketchy lounge, it was open late and had some creepy clientele, so normally I didn't end up finishing and cleaning the kitchen until it was about 2 a.m. Now, the entrance to this lounge was already pretty sketchy as well, and the building's dumpster was down an even sketchier alleyway. So every night before I left, I would take the trash down this alley, then head back inside to change my clothes and head home. I've had some weird encounters with drunk patrons, but nothing that really ever set me on edge. That night though, there's this one guy who was just acting odd and watching me the whole time I was working. Apparently one of the bartenders said that he kept asking about me as well. Well, I was taking out the trash and I turned around to make my way back out of the alley and I saw the guy standing no more than 20 feet away, asking if he could borrow my phone. I told him sorry that I didn't have it on me, but there should be a phone inside for him to use. He then starts walking closer and says, "What happens if I beat you up and find a phone on you? What do you think I'm gonna do to you?" I then notice he's pulled out a small flip knife. Luckily for me though, I had my chef's knife belt still on me. And I pulled out my 10-inch butcher knife, and even though I was terrified out of my mind, I still managed to calmly say, "Mine is bigger than yours." Thankfully, when he saw the giant knife, he just dropped his and ran the other way. I couldn't stop shaking and I was so terrified, so I went in to tell the bartender. He phoned the police and we made a report, but nothing ever came of it. Apparently, knife fights are a pretty common thing in this area of town. I'm just lucky I made it out of there without any serious injuries. Number 3. This happened about 7 years ago, but I never really got over it. I was living in a basement suite on a relatively quiet street in a small town, where nobody typically hung out at night. Being young and stupid, I often didn't bother to close any of the blinds, even though our windows were all set at ground level. Well, it was about midnight and I was laying on my bed nude, and talking to my boyfriend at the time with the lights on. So basically, due to my idiocy, anyone could see inside and look at me, but I wouldn't have been able to see them. More stupid than this was that my boyfriend and I decided to have phone sex under these conditions. When I was done on the phone and had gotten dressed, I went into my roommate's bedroom to hang out with her. Immediately after I got into the room, she and I heard someone aggressively trying to get my bedroom window open. We rushed into my room, but they were already gone. Then we heard loud footsteps running towards her bedroom instead. We then heard them shake that window, fail that, and then run around the side of the house to try the bathroom window, then mine again. Next, we heard this trespasser running up the stairs at the back of the house that led to the upstairs suite, where nobody was home. They then proceeded to try the balcony door, but at that point we'd already called the police. By the time anyone arrived, the person was already gone and never came back. But it definitely made me think twice about being so reckless again. Just knowing that somebody lurked outside my window, watching me in the aforementioned situation, then trying to frantically get in the house knowing that my roommate and I were both home, it still horrifies me to this day. Number 2. When I was in 6th grade, my school had us do one of those scammy door-to-door candy sales. I say scammy because the prizes were so far from possibly being attainable, but they sure enough kicked us students into gear. After taking all the usual routes of having my parents huck overpriced chocolate to their coworkers and shaking down friends and family, I took to the streets. It was the 90s, so I knew people in my neighborhood pretty well, although there was a huge amount of drug activity and a sketchy bar close by. But I was so motivated that I ended up about 6 blocks down, way beyond where I was allowed to go alone. I remember so vividly this one house. It was dingy with cheap blue panels. I knocked on the door and a woman answered. I recited my typical lines and she draped a hand on my shoulder, leading me into the entrance while calling up, "There's a little girl here that wants to sell us some chocolate." A man then responded from upstairs. She asked me questions like where I went to school, how old I was, where I lived, and if my parents knew where I was. Questions that were progressively making me more and more uncomfortable. I then heard a door open upstairs and looked to the stairway to see a man descending holding a cleaver. At peace with losing the sale over my life, I opted to run home as fast as I could. I never ever did door-to-door sales again. Number 1. When I was 17, I moved out of my parents' house and began working as a carny. This required me to use my pickup to tow things around the country. One night, I was heading back to South Carolina and had stopped in Kentucky at a truck stop to use the bathroom and get a snack. This is about 1 a.m. I parked on the side of the building and went inside. I always got super sketched out stopping at night just because I was a 17-year-old girl. As I was walking out, I heard, "Hey baby, where you going?" Whoever this man was kept saying things like that until I was out of view. It was a tall, skinny black man walking out of the store behind me. I hustled to my truck and locked myself in. Now, that should have been enough to make me get out of there immediately, but being tired, I decided to sift through my phone before heading out again. About 10 minutes after the cat calls, I see the same man emerge from behind a dumpster near where the semis park. A car pulled up next to the dumpster just as he walked out. What I saw next made my head absolutely spin. The back door of the car opened and a little white blonde girl, maybe 12 years old, got out. He then grabbed her by the hand, walked behind the dumpster and towards the semis. The car then took off. I was shaking so bad, but I managed to find out where they went and called the sheriff. He met me in about 10 minutes and I told him exactly what I had seen. He didn't seem too surprised and he said they'd look over the surveillance tapes, and I made sure to include information about how he catcalled me so that they knew which guy I was talking about. I left and then had no idea whatever came of it. The guy was probably long gone with the girl before the sheriff ever even met me, but maybe I saved her from a life of being some sort of a slave. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos.